And so really excited to chat with you guys and host this community call. So reminder just for anybody that's new and anybody that needs a refresh, continue to stay on mute. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat. We'll answer them at the very end of the call. And then first and foremost, we'll start off with Mike Lee with some KPIs.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. I think we've all been watching the craziness in the crypto markets for these past 2 weeks. Quickly going over some of the KPIs. We haven't done this for a couple weeks now, so if you compare it to our prior meeting, there has been a big jump, but that was probably almost 3 weeks ago at this point in time. So total rally lock bell creator coins when we last left off in mid-December was around 4.2 million rally. That's jumped up to right around 5 million and stayed pretty consistent over these past 5 days here. The biggest thing to kind of notice is the total liquidity across our Uniswap and Balancer pools has jumped up by almost 40% or so from Monday through this Friday. I think that's primarily due to obviously the rise in Ethereum's price, although Rally itself has to some degree outperformed even the rise in Ethereum's price as well. So both those things are contributing to this large increase in total liquidity. And I think that is just partially like I said, fueled by the rise in Ethereum and the forces in the broader crypto market, but also our Rally project is starting to get noticed more and more by the general crypto community, which is all super exciting. Total community treasury balance fairly flat, although I think that's primarily mostly due to us probably not running our harvest function as often as we used to before, because gas prices are just really high these days. On the creator numbers, nothing to note. We have not had any new creators launch this week. I think we do have some teed up coming soon, and user accounts are up a little bit, but not dramatically. I think that's the main things for the KPIs.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and throw it over to Ira for Rally on Coinbase Custody.
Cool. Thanks, Grant. Hey, everyone, and Happy New Year. So I just want to touch on the blog post that some of you guys might have reviewed that was posted on Medium a little earlier this week. And that was announcing that Rally is now supported by Coinbase Custody. So I just want to give you guys a quick voiceover on why this is kind of significant and actually a very exciting place for Rally to be. So you guys have probably seen some of the crypto news. There's a lot of new focus on securities law concerns, but quite frankly, if you guys saw the community call that happened right before the holidays when I was talking a little bit more about securities law matters, why it matters to us and why it matters to the whole industry, frankly. The thing is about Coinbase is that Coinbase has always been seen as a party that really works closely with the regulators, and also it's been one of the more strict exchanges. Frankly, they have their assets go through a fairly rigorous diligence review before they'll actually list it. So some of you may know Brian Brooks, who is currently the acting comptroller of the currency at the OCC. He was actually previously the Coinbase GC. And for years, he was really working to build up the regulatory regime at Coinbase to really make sure that even kind of early in the industry, Coinbase would always be seen as a party that really worked closely with regulators and worked closely to ensure that digital assets being traded on Coinbase actually did as best as possible to comply with securities law guidance and guidelines. So they had prepared this really detailed regulatory framework, and we gotten a chance at Rally to have a really early look before they even rolled it out, and it was pretty intense. So the fun thing was that I got to take a look at it early on, and Brian had asked me, he's like, if you have any comments to it, please let me know. And we'd reviewed it, we discussed it. So years later, he's now at the OCC, but now we put the Rally token to the Coinbase Custody folks as a service to some of our investors in case they wanted to custody their assets there. And it looked very similar. It's essentially the same framework that we reviewed early on that kind of went line by line over the 4 prongs of the Howey test, which, as you guys might remember, is a test that looks to see if there's been an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profit solely from the efforts of others. So kind of a lot of words there, but the main takeaway here is that the Rally token went through this extensive Coinbase review by the Coinbase Custody team, and they felt that we were unlikely to be characterized as a security and therefore offer custody. So that's really the voiceover I wanted to give. It's a great step for Rally. Obviously, we've always been working towards ensuring that Rally does everything right We want to make sure that everyone in our creator world and all of our community are well protected, and know that all along the team behind the launch of the Rally token has always been focused on this. So it's a really nice step and also great service. So if any of you guys hold Rally and would like to custody it with Coinbase, feel free to reach out to them. It's now available. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Grant. If anyone, by the way, if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up, feel free to ping me on Discord or to post a question on this chat, as Grant had mentioned. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Ira. As we go into Discord a little bit more heavy, we will have Jason give an example of the CoinBot.
Hey, everybody. Jason, I help run community, creator account management, all sorts of fun things at Rally. So this is going to be a really quick aside from the presentation itself. Just wanted to show one thing that I think is really important if I know how to use my browser anymore. This is the fun part of doing this live. Yes, here it is. Yay. I just want to give a shout out in community terms to the folks like Phelps and Sol, who have been working out the wiki at key.rally.io. And just as a precursor to what I'm going to discuss really quickly, is just there is a how-to on how to use the CoinBot for Discord at length here that talks about both the administrator side and the coin holder side and how to get connected, with a few commands and some of the, how to set up roles, how to take down roles, and that sort of thing. And there's plenty of other information in the wiki. I think it's a really great resource. We will continue to build it out with both text-based and video-based education. So I think that keep an eye on there for time to come. And if you have any questions about something that can be added to the wiki, any suggestions, questions, any of that, please feel free to, drop it into a place like our help channel in Discord. So I will stop presenting that. We can go back, Grant, to the presentation itself. And I just grabbed some screenshots for the next part here, or Kurt. Yay. So in this slide, just without taking too long to drag through a Discord server, what I wanted to show was I've been working with Nicolina, who is the creator behind Mooncoin. And she was great enough to add the CoinBot to her Discord. And you can see in a very simple way here in the server settings, if you know Discord and you're adding roles, CoinBot is listed at the top because it manages roles below it. In this case, we created 2 gates, one for a role called Mooncoin 100 for 100 coin holders of Mooncoin, and another one for 10 coins. So Mooncoin 100, you can see we've given it a very high ranking in her Discord stack rank of all the roles. And what you couldn't see at the bottom of that is, much lower down is the Mooncoin holder role. You can obviously move these roles up and down as people see fit. As she is a Twitch creator, there is a number of other roles in between that she has, from Patreon to Twitch subscribers. So it's always fitting in where it works best for you as a creator in your normal environment. We created a private room. The private channel has roles for the Mooncoin 100 and the Mooncoin holder. And you can see that somebody who's joined has been given the illustrious role of Mooncoin 100 because he holds 100 Moon. And then a little bit down the list, you have some other folks who actually hold the coin, but the number one ranked role that they have is not Mooncoin 100. So eventually, depending on how you move the role up and down, that's how people's roles will be ranked. And I wanted to show that Scooter here has a couple of the roles, both Mooncoin holder and Mooncoin 100, because he qualifies for both. And he shows sort of the stack ranking within that system. And that's kind of just a quick look at how to effectively use CoinBot. There's definitely more ways than this. I think it's a very exciting tool to start, how to use coins in a variety of ways. And I think that this, especially Discord communities, will be a key place for coin hodling and benefits for the near and long-term future.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you, Jason, on that. That's all really exciting. Ton of upside to Discord for sure with Creator Coin. And then last but not least, man, we got Joon as our special guest, which is really exciting. I know he has some really cool things planned for some of our creators in the near future. So I'll let Joon take it away.
Hey, thanks, Grant. Hey, everyone. Wonderful to be here. It's so cool to see this community sort of flourishing. I just wanted to take a little bit of time, maybe 10 minutes or so, to walk you through some of the work I've been doing in terms of research around this topic of creator coins and how it can be used with either fan communities or, this sort of hybrid fan investor community that we're seeing with Rally and associated social tokens. This is just my bio slide. I've been involved in the space for a long time, since 2013 as a reporter. And so I spent a lot of time really trying to crunch a lot of these concepts and explain it to the general public. And which is why I think there's a lot of value in delving into some of this literature in adjacent academic fields to try and glean some insight into, possible use cases for things like creator coins and social tokens. So, that's just by way of introduction. Some of you might have read Pace Notes, which is sort of a column that I publish every week on the Rally blog. We're trying to get it distributed in a bunch of other places as well, so watch out for that, thanks to Kurt's efforts. But the whole point of Pace Notes is really that, right? Can we look at literature in adjacent fields and draw some lessons, insights from it? So I've broadly broken it down to three fields that I look at. One is anthro and sociology, because there's been a lot of work that's been done on the topic of local or complementary currencies, local monies over the years. Modern local money probably started around the 1800s. So, there's a lot of history to it. And I think there's quite a bit we can glean on the successes and failures of local money experiments over time. And then there's a kind of a new field called fan studies, which looks at how fans interact with each other and with sort of artists and creators. And in particular with fan studies, there's kind of a subset looking at financial interactions of fandoms. And I think a great example of this is things like BTS. Their record label Big Hit went public a couple of months ago, and you saw this phenomenon of BTS fans who never owned any equity in anything before really subscribing and buying that Big Hit stock because they were BTS fans. So there's some interesting stuff there that we'll dive into. And then the last thing is really the history of the cooperative movement. So looking at how can we organize the way people work, the structures of work to align a bunch of incentives that we might think of as being quite disparate. For example, cooperatives are worker-owned structures, right? And so there's a bunch of work that's been done there that I think with a creator coin, you can apply some of those principles quite successfully. We can hop over to the next slide to dive in. Thank you. So this is, and I think the slides get distributed, so you can click the link or you can just check the Rally Medium blog. But I came across a really interesting paper which is all about investor fans, and this study was done in 2005, and it was really the first study that looked at this idea of financialized fandom. And so what Richard Zuber and co looked at was the performance of football club shares, and by football I mean also known as soccer, football club shares in after each match, right? So, a rational investor might think, well, look, the outcome of the match should determine how well the football club does financially in terms of prizes or TV money, and therefore those match results should move the stock of that club. And what Zuber and co found, looking at decades of data, was it didn't move, right? Those football club share prices actually didn't move after matches, even after important matches that would have, promoted the team to European competition or relegated the team down to a lower league. So that's one. And then two, they discovered that a lot of these football club shares, and they were looking at shares of English Premier League football clubs listed on the London Stock Exchange, they found the traded volume was very thin, like they were very thinly traded. And so they sort of reached this conclusion of like, this is kind of irrational. This doesn't make any sense. Like, why would any investor like buy these shares? And the kind of implication of that is that, the reason why the investors are buying the shares is because they were fans, right? They're fans of these football clubs. So they don't really care like if the team loses a match or 2 matches or 10 matches. And they're also not trading the shares, right? It's not as if they're changing their fan allegiance from one week to the next. These are lifelong fans. And so that's the kind of implied conclusion of this look at financialized fandom. And I think it has a lot of implications for the way we think about creator coins, right? So, are we designing creator coins to have a high velocity of money? Do we expect lots of trading and volume to go on? Or is it really a fan-based thing where, like, if I'm a fan of an artist who has a creator coin, I'm not really going to be selling that token, right? If I bought a certain amount, I'm just going to be holding it. So I think like that was one interesting takeaway from this study. If you look at the Medium piece, there's a kind of a follow-up study that builds on it from 2011 by Bert Scholtens. And by this stage, the football share market has matured considerably, and he identified really two classes of people who are holding these shares, and one of them is kind of the fan investor that Zuber found, and there's another class which is kind of really the financial investor, right, of these shares, who really is making decisions based on match results and so on. So there's a precedent where you see some of these financialized fan assets, they can attract speculative capital, people who are just making decisions based on whether the number is going to go up or down. And so I think that's, there wasn't a whole bunch of implied findings from that, but I think that's another sort of important point to make, which is like, you can have the same asset can attract both sort of financial capital and fan capital, if that makes any sense. We can hop over to the next slide. So that was kind of like, this is like a continuation of the fan study stuff. So, BTS, right? Their label IPO'd. Some studies say that their impact to South Korea's GDP is 3.5 billion annually. It might be more actually. And their IPO was massive, right? 1,000x oversubscribed. And a lot of the reasoning that was given by institutional funds that bought into that IPO was like, it's not that we think BTS is necessarily making this amazing music, but they have this proven fan base that is extremely active, engaged, large, and passionate, and we think that's worth something. And so, you can read the articles in Bloomberg and Reuters and so on, talking to some of these fund managers. They were really buying the shares for the BTS fan base. I think the other interesting thing here is that the BTS artists themselves, the 7 members of the band, received stock grants from the founder of the label, right, before the IPO. And so I dived into some of these interesting features with a gentleman named Tim Ingham. He started a publication called Music Business Worldwide, which is kind of a trade pub. It's read by everybody in the music business. And he really looks at all of these financial aspects of the music business. And so I really just wanted to understand the BTS phenomenon, through the lens of this IPO. And, Tim told me a couple of interesting things, right? One is that the BTS model, where you get these stock grants from the founder, that's really like a Silicon Valley style tech startup model, right? It's like, you join a company, you do the work, the company exits, and you've got a bunch of stock options, and then you can cash out. So that model is really not a thing that's been done in, the so-called Western major record labels, right? That it doesn't happen. So that's kind of a new spin that BTS and Big Hit did in terms of aligning the incentive of the creators and the record label. The other thing he really highlighted was, while the major record labels don't do that model, you have seen experimentation around this by independent artists, right? So it's kind of the Chance the Rapper model is kind of how he put it to me. So Chance the Rapper really didn't sign to any label, and instead he spun up a bunch of different companies, LLCs, that were in charge of different parts of his revenue stream. And he hired somebody to be the CEO of his kind of enterprise, right? So he had a company that looked after all his merchandising, one that looked after all his live touring, one that looked after all, and so on. So, you kind of see these kind of artist CEO models take place outside of the established major record labels. And so I think that the takeaway from that is really that there is a lot of experimentation going on in terms of the music industry, of how to structure some of these forms of labor. How do you structure the work of distributing music, creating the music, and all the ancillary businesses that goes with it. And I think the final thing he said that was really interesting was, going back to the BTS, the Big Hit IPO, this phenomenon of fans buying shares is really that, there's a non-financial dimension to the share ownership, right? And it's an affective or an emotional dimension, and fans want to buy it because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they own a piece of the band. It makes them feel like they're part of this community, and so on and so forth. And I think that's kind of the factor that should drive a lot of adoption of creator coins, right? It's this emotional dimension of ownership in the community, more so than necessarily the financial upside. So that was a bunch of things I had to talk with Tim Ingham about regarding BTS. I think we can go to the next slide. And then kind of the final bucket, or sorry, the second bucket is really about cooperatives. There's a bunch of studies that's been done in cooperatives as a structure over time. And these are some of the findings, right? So, cooperatively owned businesses tend to exhibit higher productivity. There tends to be fewer layoffs because the workers don't fire themselves. They're able to come to consensus to say, look, we'll take a hit, we'll lower our collective wages in return for not firing anybody if the economy is looking bad for the next year, for example. And they also tend to employ more people. So these are all just like historical features of cooperatives. I think the final point was that, we might think of cooperatives, we can go to the next slide. We might think of cooperatives in the context of farming cooperatives. You can see here, this is a slide from Co-ops UK from their annual report. And you'll see, agriculture is like 8 billion, right? Cooperatives in agriculture is 8 billion. You might think of cooperatives as particularly well suited to certain sectors, but the historical evidence suggests that really you find cooperatives in almost every sector. So there's no like structural reason why cooperatives can't work in a particular field. And you'll see I circled a couple of these here, which I think are kind of quite relevant to creator coins, things like education, finance, social clubs, and so on. I think these are all indicative of the fact that this structure can work quite well in these verticals, which I think are well suited for what we're trying to do with creator coins. And, collectively, it's about £2 billion in the UK worth of revenues generated by cooperatives in these verticals. So I think the cooperative evidence tells us that the idea of aligning, workers, users, and fans can work, right? And it's proven by the fact that cooperatives have been quite successful over time. We can hop over to the next slide, which is kind of building on the cooperative stuff, right? There's been two kind of very interesting schools of thought on this. One is the notion of platform cooperatives, and this is really done by an academic named Trebor Scholz in New York, along with Nathan Schneider. And they spend a lot of time trying to figure out, what does it mean to have digital platforms, right? Labor platforms, things like Uber, for example. What does it mean to have those things exist? And what would it look like if those things were organized as cooperatives? Like, what if Uber was a cooperative that was owned by all the Uber drivers, for example? And I think you actually do see a little bit of movement in that direction in the gig economy with people like Uber. And at one point, I think Nathan Schneider led an interesting movement. He was trying to raise funds from Twitter users to buy Twitter so that it would become a user-owned platform. And I think they raised quite a decent amount, but obviously it didn't work. But it goes back to this whole idea of aligning incentives of the users, the workers, and the owners of capital on a platform. So just a couple of quick points on platform co-ops. One of the things that they find is workers don't just work for wages, right? They also work for acknowledgement of their labor. So it's just like, you might pay Uber drivers X dollars, but they also want to be recognized as, people who are valued and are a valuable component of the Uber platform. And I think that ties a lot into this idea of fan labor, right? So if you read things related to how subcultures are formed, for example, there's a lot of literature, anthropological literature around that tells us, subcultures, whether it's, punk rock or, bikers or something like that, there's a few common features of them. And one of them is the enforcement of social hierarchy. It's for a subculture to be viable, it needs to have a social hierarchy, certain status levels, and those status levels are widely understood and enforced. And so I feel like the acknowledgement of labor component here speaks a little bit to that. And I think fan communities or creator coin communities could learn something from this feature. And I think you see it implicitly in things like Discord roles, right? Like, why would you care about a Discord role if not to signal your status in a certain subculture? And then related to platform cooperatives is the idea of exit to community. And this is really a thing by Nathan Schneider, who is a academic at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And his whole thing is like, when we talk about an exit in terms of a company, like we think about an IPO, right? And sort of the financial investors get to cash out. And his argument is, well, why can't an exit be something that's a bit broader? Why can't we change the definition of an exit? And why do we have the exit to a community of financial speculators? Why can't we, for example, sell a company to its customers or its users? And so that's the kind of ethos of this idea of exit to community. I did a long interview with Nathan, kind of talking about these ideas and the idea of cryptocurrency. He's also been involved in cryptocurrency for many years. And there were two interesting things he had to say there. One is this idea of governance, right? So his argument is like, he's been involved in designing a few cryptocurrencies himself. And his argument is like, if everything reduces down to a question of number go up, it's kind of problematic. It's quite hard to engage people and govern something that way because, it's a very thin cultural layer. And so he argues that you need to have some non-economized spaces for people to actually do the underlying thing that they had gathered to do, right? So, if like your community is all about, I don't know, crypto art, like you have to gather and care about the crypto art and not just, how to pump the token price so that the governance token allows you to talk about the crypto art. So, that was kind of like one of his insights. And then the other was, and he has a great handbook about all of this stuff. I thought one of the interesting mechanisms in there that he described was this idea of capped returns, right? So he gives a case study of a cooperative called Cook Alliance in California, which is it's immigrants and other folks who sell their home cooking to the general public. And they were so successful, they managed to get the law changed in California to allow this to happen. I think in the past there was some prohibition on selling your home cooked food to the public. Anyway, their structure is really one where they say, if we are to raise financial capital to fund our efforts, the terms of that raise would include a capped return on that capital. So they really want to get away from the idea of, investors seeking 100x exit, right? They might say, well, you only get like a 50% return and the rest of it goes back into the project. So I think, mechanisms like that are interesting to think about in terms of distributing or raising capital with creator coins potentially in the future. So yeah, I think that about covers my whole presentation, I think, unless there was one more slide. Maybe not. Sorry, there was one more slide, and I'll make this one quick. This is all about the history of local money. I read a lot of anthropology around this. There's been a bunch of experiments about this since the 1800s. You can think about, the interwar years when American companies used to issue company scrip, which were, kind of IOUs, private monies. In the 80s and 90s, there was a big project that actually got a lot of traction around North America in Ithaca in New York, and people were trading their time. It was a currency called Ithaca hours. And, people in town would say, well, we're just going to trade all of our services for Ithaca hours. And you can bank these hours and, you don't have to pay anybody US dollars for all of these services. So that was a big phenomenon. But I think central to a lot of these efforts was the idea that, they were trying to develop a medium of exchange that was lower friction and better than the state issued currency, right? It was really all about a means of payment. And central to this idea of means of payment is this notion of demurrage or rotting money. This was an idea from a German economist named Silvio Gesell. And his whole thing was, money only has meaning when it's spent, And you can really only you can design a money that's more readily spent with a higher velocity by making sure that it rots, right? And this goes back to ideas from the ancient Egyptians, where they would do IOUs to store their grain, and but because the grain would actually physically rot, there was a kind of inflation that was applied to those IOUs, and so you really had to spend the money to get the maximum value. And you see in cryptocurrency experience today, things like Circle's UBI have that same kind of demurrage feature built in, although they use a form of inflation rather than demurrage, which technically is a tax. So anyway, I think that sort of thing has implications for creator coins and social tokens, because I think in the use cases that we think about, we really have to be mindful of, are we trying to optimize for high velocity of creator coins, or are we really trying to optimize for a kind of fan investor or fan capital kind of use case where it's very low velocity and actually people are holding their coins for a long time and they're not really trading them? So I think there's a tension between those uses, and it's useful to bear that in mind when thinking about use cases for how to deploy some of these creator coins. I think that was really the last slide.
Awesome. Joon, that was amazing, man. Thank you for that. Outside of that, we have any questions from the community? If you want to go and type them in chat, I don't see any, but we will put some time aside to answer any questions that you may have.
I was quickly going to add a little bit more. There was, some people might have seen two new things that were released on the Rally.io site this week, but I wanted to give a little more context to that, particularly if there's any creators on this call right now. So the two changes that we made are, one, to allow donations and sending of money to be able to be denominated in dollars, not just the amount of coin. So prior, I could donate X number of coins to a creator I like, but if I was trying to donate a specific amount of dollars, we would have to do the user would have to do the math themselves. So if I'm trying to buy a CD from a creator for $10, I have to do the math myself to figure out how much coin exactly is $10. So that this was a change to make that math a little simpler. And the second one is that when a user is buying coin, we are now adding the credit card processing fee on top of the dollar. So for the same kind of reason, if I need to get a certain amount of coin to buy a $10 CD, prior I would put in, I want to buy $10 a coin, but in the end I would actually only get $9 and say 50 cents or whatever minus the credit card fee of the coin. And thus I would realize, oh, I don't actually have enough coin to send to the creator for my CD. So both these changes are made this week in order to allow more use cases and a simpler usage pattern for our creators. So just wanted to mention that as well.
Awesome. Cool. Is there anybody else that wants to make a comment or have a question or anything?
Joon, were you on the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Joon, were you on the Wednesday night, late night crypto call on Clubhouse with Jess and Alex?
I was not. I'm in London, so those are really too late.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. That was a lot of the topics that we talked about, kind of this tension that exists between how there's speculators and there's people that really want to be just more emotionally attached and part of the community. How do you separate those things? The other tension is the reality that the creators need to have an income. And hopefully part of what we can do is provide them an opportunity to let their community help them grow, their brand, their community, their art, whatever they do. And how do you enable some sort of programmatic cash flow that isn't like an inherently bad look, optically, to just be the creator taking money out of the treasury or whatever it is to pay themselves. So those are some of the issues. And so the research that you presented, I think, shed a lot of light on that. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on the discussion the other night, but it seems that this conversation is very much on the forefront of not just Rally, but all the other social token communities as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I could add a little bit to that because I think we were chatting about this a little bit in the Seed Club Discord, right? So I'm also a collaborator at Seed Club. And I mean, I think one interesting way I see people addressing this is with a new mechanism for social tokens, like people are burning tokens. And I think that could be an interesting way to thread the needle, right? Because token burning is like, you're spending it, but also the token isn't like, you're taking out of circulation. I don't know. I think people like James Young at Collab Land have done a lot of thinking about this. And if you hop in the C Club Discord, I think he wrote a lot of stuff about it. I still have to wrap my head around it. Like, this is too advanced for me financially, but it seems like that's the direction that people are heading in, this idea of token burning.
Awesome.
Any other questions, comments before we wrap it up?
I believe there was a Discord discussion about limits related to rewards on the coins. I don't know if we wanted to open it up to that discussion now, if the folks are on the call who were having that, but I think there was sort of a critical mass of people having the chat, and sort of felt like text interaction was not doing justice to the conversation. So if I know Amit's here, but if anyone else from that conversation is here, it might be a good time to open that up.
Yeah, I could provide some color on that. So we're planning on having a meeting. I guess really anybody else who would be interested in joining after this would be welcome. A discussion on rewards and how we can kind of modify the program to incentivize actual usage of the coin, maybe bringing new creators in. Just the current reward system has a number of different flaws that need to be addressed, and we're always looking for the community's input, creators' input on how can we make the reward system, and really the Rally network is giving a lot of money to creators right now in the form of Rally tokens, and I think it's we can do a better job at deploying it in a way that's more like usage-based and reward-based, truly, than the way that we're doing it right now. So if anybody has any thoughts, ideas, very much appreciate that.
Awesome. Any other comments, questions regarding that topic?
I would say if there's not any other topics, probably let everyone loose, and then whoever wants to stick around for that can do so.
Yeah, if anyone wants to stay around, I'm sure some people will be staying around for rewards and community rewards topics. But other than that, thank you guys for joining this week at the call. We will see you guys next week, and hopefully you guys have a great weekend.